We're going to talk about a new Christian thriller, Persecuted, hitting theaters today. The plot follows a television evangelist who is framed for a murder.
Yeah, well, this film, much like Dinesh D'Souza's America, asks us to imagine a world without America. This film asks us to imagine an America without religious freedom, where Stockwell will recognize in the movie a famous character actor, but most of the lead roles are play a role. But Senator Fred Thompson, his original vocation of an actor, dean of filmmaking, because with software, a laptop, and decent cameras now, independently by newcomers, but a good plot, good script, and you know what it shows? The democratization of filmmaking, because with software, a laptop, and decent cameras now, independent what even Hollywood executives are looking at, these faith-based films are made for less money, mainly because people believe in them and are committed to them, and they make a greater profit margin.
Now, we had the New York Times movie review somewhat ripped apart or criticized the film, writing in part, "This terrible attempt at a political thriller for the religious right is aimed not at Christians in general, but at a certain breed of them, the kind who feel as if the rest of the world were engaged in a giant conspiracy against the interpretation of good and truth." So the question is here, are those on the left coast ready to, do you think they're ready to deal with this type of film? And do you think reviews like this affect its box office success?
Well, the answer is no to the first question, yes to the second question. You know, what it is that mainstream film critics get hysterical over these films. I mean, the last I saw Dinesh D'Souza's film, the critics on the sites that rate them, only 10% of the critics liked Dinesh D'Souza's film. And every time one of these films come out, the critics savage the film and say it's horrible. And the film ends up still turning a decent box office and turning a profit, a big profit compared to many of the blockbusters with huge budgets that don't turn a profit, like the bombs, like The Lone Ranger last year, for example. Yeah. Like many films this year, like Tammy over the 4th of July weekend, which is a bomb. So the fact is that it shows how out of touch mainstream media film critics are with film goers. And that's true of executives in Hollywood to a great extent as well.
Yeah, and you know, we have the new movie coming out about the Exodus. It's called Exodus, too. And you think Hollywood studios really care what the New York Times says about these types of movies? Because as you mentioned, they're making money.
No, yeah, Hollywood's a very insecure town, and in order to keep their jobs, theoretically anyway, I mean, they have to make a profit. These are publicly traded companies, the biggest studios in the world. They're conglomerates. And so, yeah, they care about that. And everyone in Hollywood cares, unfortunately, about what the critics say, particularly in awards seasons, because the critics influence the award. They determine prestige. And so they do care. But ultimately, these films are proven over and over again to have these large profit margins. I mean, we had Heaven is for Real, God's Not Dead, turning huge profit margins despite the critics.
Yeah, despite the critics. Well, let's also talk about another subject of consternation, I guess, in California, and your thoughts on venture capitalist Timothy Draper's vision to split California into these 6 different states. I know you're in LA. We were saying before that would be considered South California, but as I also mentioned, maybe some folks would call it the People's Republic of Southern California.
Yeah, and that should be the current name for California, which is why Tim Draper is doing this. Our California legislature doesn't have any parallel in the Western world. I mean, we can only compare it to North Korea with the priorities they have. And here we are, a state that's ranked last when it comes to being friendly to business. We've just had large corporations like Toyota announce they're going to leave, and we are ranked 47th in education. So Tim's trying to do something. He calls it a reboot of California, but unfortunately, the obstacles politically and even logistically against this are so great. I don't think it's possible. I mean, and also there's a lot of other problems it creates in terms of the water and the power and the services given at the state level and how that's divided up in 6 states. And then, of course, this would change the balance in the Senate, changing California from 2 senators to 12 senators, and both parties would be wrangling. And any proposal like this, even if it were approved by the California voters, guess what? It has to be approved by Congress. Can you imagine?
No, I can't imagine. But that said, all those obstacles are in place here. But it does look like this might get on the ballot, even a slim chance of it getting on the ballot. What do you think the vote would look like if it does go on that ballot?
Yeah, I mean, he's got 1.3 million signatures according to his own website, and yet he will get on the ballot if he has those signatures. But I do think that in California, there's enough union power, there's enough power on the left to mobilize voters that I don't expect it to pass here in California.
All right. Well, I guess maybe that's a good thing because we do have 50 stars on our flag. We don't want to have to get a whole new flag, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. There's a lot of ramifications we don't want to get.
Yeah, maybe that's one of the smaller ramifications here. But
would have to memorize so many more states.
Yes,
including one called Silicon Valley, that would be the richest state in the country.
Nice place to live, even nicer to visit. James, and I know, as you mentioned, the water supply is very short out there in California, so we do appreciate you shaving for your appearance today.
Well, thank you.
All right, James Hirsen, our man out there in California on the left coast. As always, great to talk to you.
Great to talk to you. Have a wonderful weekend.
All right, well, we kind of trivialized that issue a little bit, but California is dealing with some serious problems, including that ongoing drought out there, and a lot of folks concerned about that. A lot of folks turning in their neighbors for watering their lawns, too, out there in California. We got more ahead here on America's Forum, including your comments. I promise we'll get to them coming up right after this short commercial break.